Okay, so why don't we let the panelists introduce themselves. Hannah, you're up on my screen, so why don't you go first?
Hello, everyone. My name is Hannah Hong, and I'm a fourth-year medical student at KCUMB. That's Kansas City University of Medicine and Biosciences. It's a mouthful. So I'm from Florida. Went to grad school in New York for a couple of years to do a master's in public health, and then I moved out to Kansas City for med school. I just matched, obviously, in OB/GYN at Orlando Health, and that was my first choice. So.
Woohoo! All right, Kathleen, do you want to go next? Kathleen, do you want to introduce yourself next?
I don't hear you. I don't think I hear.
I'm there. Oh, you gotta love Zoom meeting technology. Lori, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Lori. I go to Chicago College of Osteopathic Medicine, so one of the Midwestern campuses. I'm originally from this area of Chicago, and I matched OB/GYN at Mercy Health Muskegon.
Yeah, and Kathleen, I think you're muted, which is why we can't hear you. Let's see who else is in here. That's Iris. Are you in here?
Yep. I'm Iris. I go to Rocky Vista in Denver, Colorado, and I'm from Denver. I got my undergraduate at Montana State, and then moved back to Colorado for med school, and I matched at St. Joe's in Denver also. Just Colorado. Love it.
Congrats. Desiree, are you in here again?
Yeah, I'm here.
Cool. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
So I'm Desiree. I go to Kansas City University with Hannah, and I matched OB at Sparrow Health, MSU.
And then Kathleen, did you figure out the audio yet? Doesn't sound like it. So I'll go ahead and ask the first question, and I'll text Kathleen and see if we can't troubleshoot. So the first question was, how did you pick OB/GYN? When and how did you know you wanted to do it? And are you interested in a subspecialty? And if you are, do you think that's going to be challenging as a DO?
So we just go, okay, I'll start. So for me, I didn't really know until my third year clinical rotations that I wanted to do OB/GYN. I think, doing clinicals and then, compared to your didactics are two very completely different experiences. So for me, I think just experiencing my OB/GYN rotation and being around the clinicians and actually getting involved helped me solidify that. For me, I've always wanted to be kind of like the family medicine physician, but for women. I've always been about women's rights, women's health, during my master's program, I studied a lot of women's health and preventative medicine and increasing access to care. So I kind of had an inkling before medical school, but then during my clinical rotations, I really loved how you can get both the continuity of care, and I also loved working with my hands. I always was interested in surgery as well, and doing OB/GYN, you kind of get the best of both worlds. So that's pretty much how I ended up loving OB, to put it simply.
I can go. I decided to do OB like late in my second year of medical school, and then kind of the beginning of my third year was a really confusing time because I really didn't like any of the rotations that I did. And then I really liked orthopedic surgery. So then I was like, maybe I'll do that. But then I did my OBGYN rotation and was like, no, this is definitely it. So I think that obviously, hopefully you guys have had that feeling if you're here, or you've at least had an inkling of that feeling if you're considering it. And as far as the subspecialty goes, I think that when you get into residency, as far as like the advice I've gotten, I don't want to do a subspecialty, but from the people I've spoken to that do, I think it matters a lot more what residency you go to rather than if you're a DO student. So academic institutions are just going to have a lot better resources in terms of research and exposure to those subspecialties than community programs are. And that's not to say that like doing a subspecialty from a community program is impossible. It just, you will have to put a little bit more work in, I think, to find those resources that aren't so readily available.
I can go. I chose OB-GYN after my third year clerkship. It was kind of like that feeling everyone talks about, kind of knowing what they want to do when you're just working in the field. And I think one important thing is I think all of us love the variety and like that there's clinic, there's surgery, there's deliveries. So just make sure when you're writing your personal statement, you're not too cliche with that answer. Try to like journal during that time, or when you're on auditions in OB-GYN, try and journal like what specifically you love about it. For me, I knew I would be happy as a generalist, and I'm not 100% committed to a subspecialty. But I am interested in REI, but I'm not 100% committed to that yet because I need to experience it more. I think being a DO, you always have to work a little bit harder. But I think it comes down to the research you're doing, the connections you're making, and just like putting your name out there.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Yay. Okay. So my name's Kathleen Ackerd. I'm a fourth year medical student at the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine. Oh, I'm seeing myself on two screens right now. This is weird. And I just matched OB-GYN at St. Luke's University Health Network in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, which was my first choice. So I was really happy about that. I'm undecided on what I want to do. I could definitely see myself being a generalist, but I also really love operating and being in the OR. So I could also see myself going the MIGS route, or maybe even the gyn-onc route, depending on if I want to give up delivering babies. So that's kind of my spiel.
So kind of, I guess, along with what everyone else said, I've always been really passionate about women's health. I went into medicine for primary care. I really liked the ability to educate my patients. Preventative health was something that I was always really passionate about too. And my kind of first experience with medicine, or women's health in general, when I was 10, my mom was actually diagnosed with cervical cancer. So that kind of was like my first experience with medicine and with the healthcare field and the importance of preventative medicine and educating your patients and all that. But before I went to med school, I actually scribed in the ED for 2 years, and I spent all of medical school thinking that I was going to go and work in the ED. It was just kind of the beast I knew. I loved the diversity of working in the ED. I loved the procedural aspect. I played sports my whole life, so I loved to use my hands. But with the ED, you don't have any continuity with your patients. There's not really an opportunity to educate. And that was what I found with OB. You have clinic and you have surgery days, but you still get the longevity with your patients. And delivering babies was probably just the most meaningful experience I had throughout all of medical school. So that was kind of why I chose it. The one field I've been interested in is MFM. I really liked internal medicine too on my rotations. And I like the complexity of the cases. And so, the higher risk pregnancies, the twin deliveries, cerclages, preeclampsia, gestational diabetes, all that stuff was really interesting to me. So MFM tends to be I think all of the subspecialties in OP are pretty competitive if you want to subspecialize, but MFM tends to be, they say, one of the lesser competitive fields. So, and like somebody else said, it's more so, I think, about where you do residency and your research and the connections you have, more so versus if you're a DO or an MD. And actually, the chief at the program that I just matched at matched MFM, and she's a DO, and she's coming out of a community program. So it can be done, but it's just more so about your connections and how hard you show your passion for the field.
Thanks, everyone. So the next bucket of questions were around kind of the preclinical years. So people wanted you to talk about what you did in your first 2 years in terms of your preclinical coursework that helped you successfully match. And then did you do any research? When did you start that research? Who did you do it with? Does it have to be related to OB-GYN for it to be useful to matching? Those kinds of things.
I can start. So I am not a bench research person, and I think that shows in your application when you talk about it to people. So if you are super passionate about, pipetting whatever, and you have like research that you want to get involved in and you're passionate about it, go for it. It doesn't have to be OB-GYN related, because I think that shows. And I am really interested in QI projects. So I did a QI project, like it was more longitudinal of like assessing how medical students studied and assessing the transition from college to medical school and who's successful and how can we help people who are more at risk. And I thought that I talked really passionately about that in my interviews, and I thought that it was like, even though it wasn't OB-GYN related, people are like, oh, that would be interesting if you could do something similar with helping people transition from medical school to residency. So I wouldn't say that you have to have something super duper OB-GYN related, as long as it's something and you show that you've done work and you work hard.
Okay, I can go. During my first 2 years, I mostly just worked on studying for classes and doing really well on boards. And then for research, I did research about the fibularis brevis with the anatomist at my school. And I think that most programs are generally looking to see that you like the research you did, that it's something you know a lot about, and that you can appreciate research in general, since that's something you have to do in residency. I don't think you have to do something women's health related, but I think you'll probably enjoy it more if you do choose to do that.
My extracurricular activities, like all of medical school, were all AMA related and my state medical society related. And I didn't have any research, which was never brought up really on interviews. I think kind of like everyone has said, like, if it's something that you're into, then you should do it and you should like spend your energy there. I was interested in the policy and advocacy piece of the AMA and with my state society, and so I did a lot of that. And that's what I talked about on my interviews. So I think that like whatever you are interested in is what you should pursue. And if research is just something that you're really not into, it will show on your application and when you interview that it was just something that you like. If you just did it just to do it and you don't have much to say about it, that will show on your interviews. So I wouldn't say just do it to say you did it. I would do it if you are interested in it and if it's a project you're into.
So I will say, from my perspective, I'm kind of interested to see how this affected other people. I did consider myself a pretty competitive applicant for DOs, and I ended up with 2 university academic interviews. I mostly focused on community programs, but for the 2 university interviews I had, I was asked at both why I did not have any research. I did not do research. I knew, I was either going to go into ED or I was going to go into some primary care field that really didn't need research, and I wasn't a bench research person. And so I didn't do any. And when it came to my university interviews, I was asked at both why I didn't have research, and I was asked at both what my research project was going to be if I did end up at those programs. So I think if you're interested in academic programs, it could possibly affect you if you don't have research. So I'm not sure how that affected the other panelists, but I did think that it may have been a red flag for me when it came to looking at academic university programs. So besides that, I did a lot of work at DoCare. I held a leadership position at DoCare, which is the main club on campus that manages medical mission trips. So I was a volunteer services position, and so I set up a lot of volunteer positions at my school, and that's pretty much the majority of where my extracurricular was.
So I guess first 2 years, to be honest, I wasn't really that involved because for me, I was really trying to focus on school. I'll be honest, I struggled in a few of my classes, and I felt like I couldn't take time away from classes. So if you aren't as involved, I guess I'm just an example of living proof that you can, match into your dream specialty at a program you want without having being really involved. That doesn't mean, don't stop from achieving what you want to do in terms of involvement. And if you want to pursue research, do it, because like all the other panelists said, it'll show in your application how passionate you are for a particular field or a particular research topic of interest. I did a little bit of anatomy research, but nothing OB-GYN related. I did have a little bit of involvement, like community service-wise with my school, but nothing like that would stand out. I think for me, what really kind of tied together were some internships, which I'm sure we'll get into later, so I'll save that for, when the question arises. But I also agree with Desiree, just because I have other classmates and other friends who are at academic centers, and I know if you want to go into an academic center, research is very, very important, and it's something that they just want to see continuity with. In terms of clinicals, I did do a case report, so that's something that you could always get involved in. It's very easy, really simple. If you want to show that you're more proactive and that you have a little bit of interest in research, when you do your clinicals on your OB-GYN rotation, ask, I guess it helps more if there's a specific field, like if you have a gynec case report, just because those are more interesting, or MFM, because they'll always have more interesting cases. But if you just show that you're proactive and that you want to be more involved, you can ask one of the attendings or one of the residents or fellows if you work with any other people in academics that you want to do a case report, and hopefully they'll be able to get one to you, and you can write that up, and it's really easy. So that's like another way to get more involved if you weren't too involved your first 2 years in research.
Great. So the next thing people wanted to talk about a lot, as you can probably imagine, are COMLEX and USMLE. So just generally, people wanted to know, do you have any advice for folks who scored low on step one? Likewise, what is your advice if they scored low on COMLEX? Do you feel like you had to take the USMLE to match? Are there a range of scores for which people should aim? And then finally, with step one going past FEL, should people still even take the USMLE? Which I know that's a big topic that you may not, I think we're all starting to figure out, but it's just something a lot of people have questions about.
I can go. I have lots of mixed feelings about step one going past FAIL. I think that maybe in these first couple years, it will not do great things for DOs, because it was kind of like our opportunity to prove that we were as smart as MD students. And that's going to kind of go away. At my school, we were required to take both step one and level one. But that would be my recommendation, is to still do it, because I think I ran into a lot of programs that still only accept that and are still very much like, I don't really know what to do with I don't really know what to do with a COMLEX score, and I think that change is happening, but change happens slow. And so I think that to put yourself in the most competitive position, I would say still take them both. I don't think that you necessarily need to take both step 2 and level 2, but I do think, when does it go pass fail? In like 2 years or something?
It's 2022.
Yeah.
Something like
I
that.
would say definitely, as long as you still have a score, take them both. I don't know if some of the other panelists have a different experience with that, but that would be my recommendation. And as far as a low score, I mean, it's over and done with, and there's not a lot you can do about it. And I would say just try to do your best to make the other parts of your application as competitive as they can be, and try to make your step 2 score better. But it's not all about the test score, and like you can still get your foot in the door with the right connections and the right extracurriculars, and like it is, I know it's a big deal what your step 1 score is, but if it's not the best that you've ever had, then it's really not the end of the world. And all you can really do is try to boost your application in other areas. And so I would try really hard not to dwell too much on it.
I'm kind of the opposite of Iris. I matched at a university program and I didn't take step 1. I did not do very well on complex level 1. I was expecting to score 100 points higher than what I got, and I was devastated when I got my score back, and I like told the OB advisor at my school, and she visibly winced, which is a moment that I have burned into the back of my brain because it was like so awful. And you know, I'm a person, I think, that looks like that performs a lot better than I look on paper. And I knew that that might have precluded me from applying to OB-GYN. And I didn't take step 1, but I went out there and I like really, really hard tried to get away rotations because I knew that that was going to be my key to matching into a program, which is what worked for me. I did take step 2 and I did pretty well on it. Which I think also helped. And I did show improvement from my complex level 1 to my complex level 2, which also helped. But there are filters that exist and it like totally sucks. And if I hadn't done so many sub-I, I did 4 sub-Is, and if I hadn't done those rotations, I don't think I would have matched, or I wouldn't have matched I wouldn't have gotten as many interviews as I did. But I totally agree also with what you were saying, because I have a friend who also applied OB-GYN and she's an MD, and she had like a 250 on her step 1, and I got 8 interviews and she got like 10 interviews, a couple more university programs, but her step 1 did not open doors the way that she thought it would. So it's really just like hit or miss. And a sub-I is like an audition rotation. I got laughed at once for using the word audition rotation. So I just say sub-I or away rotation now. So that's kind of what my 2 cents is. Like, I think that you have to be very insightful as to whether you're better on paper or you're better in person, and kind of just work whatever angle that is for you. And you have to be like really insightful, you know, like if you haven't gotten honors on a lot of your rotations, if you feel like you're in like a lot of awkward situations, like if you don't feel like you always get along with everyone, like, but you look great on paper, I might not do as many sub-Is.
Yeah, so I agree with Kathleen in that. So I also did not do well on complex, something that I actually even decided to include on my personal statement, just to be real with people who are reading my application, why I might have not done as well. I also took step 1 and step 2 just because I think that's, again, just my opinion, that it might open more doors for you. I mean, if you think you're going to score well, then take it. But if you did really well in complex and you're like, oh, I don't know, maybe I can just run with the score, then maybe don't take step. I think a lot of programs, I mean, we say the word DO-friendly. You guys all know what I mean. I mean, programs that are not as DO-friendly are going to want step. And that might be an avenue where you might want to take step to make yourself, look more competitive. But again, I agree with the other panelists that step 1 scores, comm scores aren't everything. Again, I'm another example of you can, have a lower than average board score on all your exams and still be able to match somewhere that you want. You just have to make other parts of your application look stronger and do well on your clinical rotations and your sub-internship. And I think that's where my strengths kind of showed, which again, I keep bringing up sub-internships, but I know we'll talk about it later. But if you don't have the scores that you want, again, you have to shine in other ways. And that's just the reality. And yes, there are screens. In order to get sub-internships, sometimes some programs will have like a step minimum or a complex minimum, and they won't accept you if you don't have that minimum score. Just like getting an interview, you might have to have a minimum. But if you do a sub-internship somewhere and you don't meet that minimum, then you can still be granted an interview. So it just depends how you get your foot in the door.
So I took both COMLEX and USMLE steps 1 and 2. On both first exams, I did very average. And then I just like really prioritized studying for step 2 for both of them, because I just wanted to show that I could increase my score and do a lot better. So I would say if that happened to you or is happening to you, don't follow the advice that everyone says, like you don't have to study as hard for step 2. You should just like work harder and make that a priority in that study time you get. I matched at a place that I did a sub-I, but I also know that I got a few interviews from the auditions I did. I know you guys are probably in a weird situation with the pandemic and getting sub-Is. I would see if maybe there's like you could do it in January, I think is like the very latest that you can do a sub-I. So maybe try to set up some later ones, even though I know that's not ideal. Interview season doesn't end until like the end of December. So if you can even get November, December, that would be a good idea.
So I took all the tests. I took both levels and I took both steps. I'm originally from California, and when this process started, I did really hope to get back to California. And you know, this answer is really going to depend on what your goals are and where you're trying to be, because like Hannah said, certain parts of the country are more DO friendly, and California tends to be one of the places that's just not. And so I knew for me going into it that I really had to take step and I had to do well. There's going to be score filters even when you apply for sub-Is. There are programs that are going to say, unless you have, you know, a step 1 of this, we won't consider you, or unless you have a level 1 of this, we won't consider you. But I do know, I mean, just some people have had success with being persistent, you know, showing a real interest in a specific area. My med school's in the Midwest. The Midwest tends to be very DO friendly. So I have friends, you know, who only took COMLEX and had low scores or average scores. And there's programs for everyone, as long as you know, adjust your expectations of where you want to be. If you just want to be an OB, even if you don't get to go home, then, you know, everything works out the way that it's supposed to. I'm kind of on the fence about them changing step 1 to pass fail, because I do think for certain candidates who are trying to apply to more competitive areas, there's not really an equalizing factor anymore. And I do think that if I had a pass no pass step, I'm not sure I would have been considered at some of the places that I had been considered at without an audition. And I know I matched at a place that I did a sub-I at, and it seems like most people who are on the panel actually matched at a place they did a sub-I. So it's kind of a convoluted answer, but yes.
That's a good segue into probably the most number of questions that were submitted were on sub-Is, away rotations, etc. So can you briefly describe the process you went through for getting these away rotations? What strategies did you use in choosing where to do these rotations? For example, community versus academic. How many audition rotations do you recommend a person does? Did you apply for any reach rotations, quote, reach rotations at schools not traditionally known for taking DOs? Let's start with those questions first, and then we can talk about kind of the reality now, and COVID-19's kind of mucked everything up.
I'll start. So for me, my situation's a little different just because I actually end up taking step 1 after 30 of clinicals, which I would I don't recommend because it kind of messed up my application process for sub-Is. I applied way later than I wanted to, but if you do decide to take it after 30 years, just try to take it earlier, I guess during your third year of clinicals and not towards the end like I did. So because I applied late, I was a little limited on where I could apply, but honestly, these sub-Is could potentially be your next home, residency home. So definitely make sure you apply to sub-Is where you could really see yourself at, and programs where maybe there's not a lot of information. You know, say you see a program that you're really interested in, but there's not a lot of information and you just want to get to know the program more. And you're thinking about choosing that place, but you just don't know, then go ahead and apply. Be persistent. That's like the biggest advice I have. For me, I knew that I wanted to be back in Florida. So I knew I wanted to be at one of the programs here, and my core rotations are in Orlando. So I kind of had that opportunity to apply to programs here in the city. And for me, I actually reached out to them it's funny because on my sub-I, one of the coordinators remembered me because she said that I had emailed her back in like March at the beginning of the year. I did my sub-I in October. So she remembered my email from like months prior just because I had reached out to her. So if there's a program that you're really, really interested in, just be persistent, email them. Obviously don't email them like, you know, every other day, but you know, an email every week or 2 weeks is probably sufficient, just to show how persistent you are, because I think they want students who want their programs. They're not going to take someone who's not interested. So if you just keep at it and keep reaching out to them, I think that's really the best way. Kind of losing my train of thought now. If anyone else wants to.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I completely agree with you, Hannah. I think you need to be persistently professional or professionally persistent, one of those two. Because just like you said, programs want people who want to be there. So I guess kind of just to start from the beginning for my sub-I experience, it was really hard for me to get sub-Is because a lot of places have score filters. Like a lot of places want to see a 550 or a 600 on Comlex, especially in the Northeast where there are just so many incredible applicants, or they want you to have a step score, which I didn't have. So it was tough, you know. I feel like I didn't get a lot of the traditional like L&D sub-Is, so I backdoored my way into the subspecialties. So, you know, I didn't have the board score to get the labor and delivery rotation at Lincoln Hospital, which is right here in Philadelphia. So I emailed one of their gynocs and was like, hey, can I rotate with you? And it was actually great because I got to work with just her. So she wrote me a letter. And then it was just one resident. So I got to know the two of them really well. And then I got a lot of surgical skills because it wasn't like I was rotating with a new attending every single day. Same thing with St. Luke's. They only take Temple students, but I like had a friend who was an intern in a different specialty. And I was like, hey, I'm really interested. Can I get in your wait list? If you don't have anyone, like I'll do a subspecialty. And I got into Urogyn, and that's how I got in there. So I would say that even if you can't get the traditional sub-I, even doing an elective rotation in something that's related to OBGYN where you can be like, hey, can I come and spend a weekend in labor and delivery with you or do a call shift? You can kind of get your foot in the door that way if you don't have the scores to get into like a traditional audition rotation or sub-I.
And then someone asked in the chat who, like, I think they want guidance on who you were emailing and what happens if you don't get responses.
Sure. So I thought VSAS was a complete waste of money. It felt like I was just throwing money into a dumpster. I applied to a lot of rotations on VSAS, but only got one offer. And it was because I had gone to that program and met with him. And he was like, oh, I'll save you a spot on VSAS. So I think that this is a thing that program coordinators and program directors do. They like save spots on VSAS, which is why people don't really, I don't know anyone who was like, got a lot of stuff through VSAS. Like emailing them, what I would do is email them, state like your name, what you're interested in, send them a copy of your resume. If they give you an application, fill it out, send it in. If they don't respond, I would respond within a week. And I would also be mindful of like what else is going on at the time. Like if you guys are M1s and M2s and you're emailing during like the thick of like residency interviews and like rank lists, like it's probably going to take a little bit longer to hear back. But, you know, always like send, like, I don't know if I would send more than like 2 or 3 like honestly, probably like two. I would send an email, one follow-up, maybe another follow-up 2 weeks later. And if they're not responding, I would just, wash your hands and be done with it. But I mean, yeah, it was really difficult to find sub-Is. So my heart goes out for you guys with all of this that's going on with COVID right now. Something's going to have to change.
Yeah, I had the same experience with VSAS. Like one program I reached out to, they were like, yeah, just apply through VSAS formally and then we'll accept you. So I think when you're figuring out where to go, for me, what was most important is I wanted to stay in the Midwest because that's where I'm from. That's where my family is, where my husband's family is. So first I filtered it by location. One thing I didn't know that I'm glad I found out later was that Frida, if you're using that, they will tell you scores that aren't necessarily true that they require. So make sure you go to that hospital website and look and see. I found that most places just said you need to pass on your first attempt. But a lot of places didn't say it's this specific score, not that they don't filter things out that way, but I would still reach out. The next step, what I did is I emailed program coordinators because often if they're usually in charge of getting medical students in, and if they're not, they know who is. And from there, the rest of my sub-Is, I didn't even have to go through VSAS. So that was good to know that I could just email for free. And I did that early. I started in March, so definitely start that if you haven't. And yeah, I would go by location and then figure out what's important to you, community, academic, if they have fellowships in-house or not, and then filter it out that way.
I agree with everything everyone has said, that I probably applied like conservatively to like 30 sub-Is on VSAS and didn't get one of them. All the sub-Is that I applied to were from like ones that had external applications. I do think that maybe something that I talked to some classmates about on VSAS, you can select a date range that you want to go, and a lot of programs fill their most desirable dates with their home students. So if it's a place you really want to go to in their VSAS application and that's how you apply, I would just make sure you like select all the dates that they offer, because then your name will be in the, because like if they fill all their spots for the date range that you picked, then they don't look at you if they have dates open another time. It's like how VSAS works, and it's really dumb. But if there's a place that you really want to go, make sure you select all those date ranges, and I think that will increase your chances of getting one. And then something that seems obvious that I wish that I had done a little more of was actually more research on the programs that I applied to sub-Is at. I kind of did just like a shotgun apply to a lot of places, and kind of wish that I had spent more time at the beginning thinking about like what kind of program I wanted to be at and what was important to me, like Lori said, so that you, like everyone has mentioned, a sub-I can really, really, really get your foot in the door. And that's your chance to like show the residents and the faculty who you are and how hard you can work. And that will go so much farther than any other paper application. And so if you put the work in up front to figure out what programs you're really, really excited about and work hard to get those sub-Is, that's really important.
Yeah, I agree with everything that everyone's already said. I just picked my sub-Is basically off of where I could see myself living and where I could see myself being happy. Because like Hannah said, this could potentially be your home. And yeah, I think out of all of the ones I applied to on VSAS, I think in retrospect, I did 4 sub-Is and only one of them actually used VSAS. So it is kind of like a money dump. Yeah, so I mean, and what Iris was saying is right too. Do research on the programs. I mean, the Reddit spreadsheet is, you're gonna have pluses and minuses. Some people are gonna like some programs, some people are not. But I think in general, when it comes down to like, resident friendliness, attendings, resident work hours, like those basic things that you want answered about a program that you're gonna spend a month at and maybe match at, are good questions to get from the spreadsheet.
I just wanted to really quickly add too, before I forget, So when you do, there was one sub-I that I did get through VSAS, shockingly, but my score actually was a few points below their minimum, which so I don't know if they have a hard and fast filter, but if your score does fall ish kind of in that lower end, don't be afraid to apply, because where are you going to lose? Like, that could be an opportunity for you to get a sub-I there. And don't be afraid to call either, because I called so many programs, and a few of my sub-Is I did get from actually calling them. So if you can find the phone number somehow to the program coordinator, not the PD, because I'm sure they'd be annoyed if you called the PD directly, but just the program coordinator, I would also recommend that too, if you can find it.
And then also, I would look and see where students from your school have gone in the past and contact those people. That was immensely helpful for me. I literally emailed every single person, and I was like, hi, I'm interested in OB-GYN. Any tips you can give me? I'm looking for rotations. For one program, Inspira, it's a formerly AOA program. They have a 525 minimum COMLEX level 1, and I didn't have that. And I emailed one of the alumni of my school who also has this really famous Instagram page. And she literally went to her program director and was like, hey, this is my friend. She's awesome. Can she have a sub-I here? And then I went and I rotated there. I just use any connection you have. Your friend's dad's brother's girlfriend, whatever, do it.
Great. So the next set of questions, kind of in the same bucket. What is the best way to prepare for these away rotations, especially if you're a student who has never worked with OBGYN residents, or say on a labor and delivery floor? What if you've not been able to scrub on procedures? And then any advice for folks who have an audition rotation canceled because of COVID-19?
I think for preparing for your audition, I think there's different categories. You can probably Google and find the most general categories. But I would say fetal heart tones, being able to interpret that strip. I was asked to do that a lot on my audition rotations. Knowing postpartum hemorrhage medications, definitely knowing your anatomy during a C-section, what layer are we going through? Those types of things are really important. And then I would go through hypertension, diabetes, just knowing the basics. What was very helpful was having that red book that we all hopefully know about and talk about, that you can get on Amazon. And then also practicing your ties. I was asked to do two-handed and one-handed ties a lot. So practicing your suturing, just usually if I was scrubbed in, the most I did was close a port. So it's nothing too crazy, but you just want to be ready for that moment to just show that you're actively engaged in all of that. Another thing is you want to make sure that you know how to write a really good note and look into what is a good note for OB-GYN, because it's very different than any other note, as I'm sure you know. And make sure you know that format. And if you don't, it's okay to ask the resident to give you a template that you can look at. So then you're just showing initiative and you can get that done and be helpful. Sorry, I forgot the question about COVID-19.
Yeah, just what advice would you give to folks whose audition rotations have been canceled because of COVID?
Yeah, I don't know the answer. I'm sure no one really knows, but I mean, I would try to push things till later in the year if you can. Like I said, I don't think December is too late, because a lot of programs, if you're auditioning there, they'll give you an interview while you're there. At least that happened for me. Other than that, I think that maybe for this year, they're going to have to be a bit more lenient with applicants, because they're going to understand that this is going on for everyone. So try not to take it too personal, I guess.
My advice for sub-Is is just be prepared to work really, really hard. Be the first one there and the last one to leave, and just literally, if anyone says they need anything, just be I'll do it. And just, even if you don't know how, you'll figure it out and ask questions, and just be eager and ready to learn. But it's in a fine line of you don't want to seem like you're like up everyone's butts, not in that way, but like find the line between like working really hard and being eager to learn and excited to be there and not annoying, if that makes sense. And just pick up, like, you can find little ways to be really helpful. That doesn't have to do with like, I agree with all the things Lori said about like stuff to review, but even like when you notice that every time there's a triage patient that the intern grabs the ultrasound, just like when you hear the nurses talk about a triage patient, you just go grab the ultrasound and be like, I got it. And so like find little stuff like that to do, and that like stands out to residents, and residents will be like, oh, she's like really going out of her way to try to be helpful.
I completely agree with you. So I would say, like, just piggybacking off of that is just like watch the interns and the residents and see kind of like what they do the first few days you're there, and then see how, like, you know, you can do that to free them up to do something else. So if they hold the patient while the patient's getting her spinal for a C-section, be like, oh, hey, do you want to do that? Like, find out what their glove size is and pull their gloves, get warm blankets, like help move the patients without being asked. Just little stuff like that, like, really helps. And then I would also say, like, I had some really great rotation experiences where I like made like friends, and it was like, we were just like really good at like trading on and off and like being helpful, like basically like co-subis. And then I had one experience where this one girl had like never worked with residents before. So I think she was used to basically like being the first to like do anything. So as soon as they would call like, oh, we're gonna take her back for a section, she'd be like, can I go, like, student? And I was just like, hey, like, you know, you've gone for the last 4 C-sections, like, would you mind if I like went for one, you know? And I feel like I'm an assertive person, but I'm just like not aggressive like that. And I felt like I didn't want to be like, oh, me, because then it would just be like too aggressive. I don't know. So actually one of the residents pulled me aside later that week, and she was like, hey, like, I just want to let you know you're doing a really good job. Like, I know that like this other person is kind of jumping in and like wanting to do a lot of stuff, but you know, like, you're doing a really good job, and even though you're quieter, you're getting stuff done without like annoying people basically. So I would just like try to be helpful, but like not too helpful to the point as where you're like annoying people. But then, yeah, I agree with what everyone said, like, know how to write a strip note, know how to write a mag note. And if you don't know how to do something, like, be honest. On my 3rd year rotation, I did not do one speculum exam. I did not deliver a baby. I think I maybe scrubbed into 1 surgery. So I didn't know how to do anything from like an OB-GYN perspective. Like, I didn't even know what a mag note was. So like, I was just very upfront about that at first. And I was like, hey, like, I didn't have the best 3rd year rotation. So like, you know, I'm going to learn fast, but just treat me like a 3rd year at first. And like, I wasn't afraid to be vulnerable because I like had said that up front.
Yeah, so I, again, agree with everyone and what they've said. So I definitely think that sub-Is are where you can really shine. And, you know, so most audition sub-Is, I think, will expect you to have rotated already, you know, through your 3rd year clinical and OB-GYN, but everyone has different experiences. So again, if you aren't comfortable in something, don't be afraid to voice that. And it's okay if you, obviously, you know, prepare as best you can, but it's okay if you get a question wrong. And I think the biggest thing that attending residents look for is how you respond to getting something wrong. You know, are you going to be really proud about it and, you know, make an excuse of why did you get wrong, or are you going to respond in a different way and say, oh, I didn't know that, you know, let me go look it up later. Or if they ask you a question you don't know, just say, I don't know, but I'll look it up later and I'll get back to you. Look it up and give them the answer that they were looking for. Again, be a team player. Honestly, you know, there's always that 1 or 2 med student who kind of like Kathleen was saying, tries to take over everything. But just, if you show that you're a team player, it resonates with the residents, because, you know, being in residency, you're on a team, you're working with each other, and they want someone who they can get along with and they can see themselves working with, because you could potentially be on their team in the future. So, you know, just be respectful and mindful of the other students and work together as a team. But also, like, again, like, there are other ways that you can shine. You know, if you're on a gynecology week, go in and prep the patient before any of the residents come in. Also, nurses are, I mean, in my situation or in my experience, they can be your best friend. Be nice to, I mean, it's silly that I should even have to say this, but really, like, be nice to everyone. Like, nurses are not subordinates. They're, the labor and delivery nurses can be the most helpful and educational people on this planet. They've been working on the floor much longer than any of us have, and they can give some pretty good advice on how to work with patients. And, you know, be very helpful to the nurses, because they will thank you later, and it'll make your life on sub-Is a lot easier, from my experience.
I think everyone's given really great advice. But the biggest thing, and I don't know how this is going to affect you guys because it's hard for you guys to set up sub-Is, but a lot of advice I had got was that you're not going to be good your first sub-I and maybe your first 2 sub-Is, you know, and it's okay. We're all type A, we're all perfectionists, you know, we don't like to suck at things, but that's going to happen the first few weeks, especially if you've not had any experience with an OB-GYN residency, you know, the hierarchy, which I didn't. So I was like a fish out of water. And my first sub-I was MFM. So I wasn't even like regular OB. I was like a subspecialty. So you're not going to be good. But I feel like the biggest things that I focused on during my sub-Is, and I think ultimately what residents care about, is how eager are you to learn and how teachable are you? Because, you know, not everybody's going to have the same knowledge base. Maybe somebody knows more about something than me, but at the end of the day, if you're the person who's never going to be outworked, and if you can always show that you're eager to learn and that you can be taught anything, I think those are the most important things that any resident is going to want to see, period. So that's all I have to say about that.
Great. And then just, I know I said I wasn't going to answer, but I just want to let people know that the Association of Professors in Gynecology and Obstetrics, which is the organization of pretty much all of the med ed folks in OBGYN, met this week, I think, to kind of talk about what the application process is going to look like. So I think they're going to be releasing stuff in the coming weeks. So I know that, like people here said, aren't able to give the best answer just because we're all students, but I think guidance is coming down if that helps your anxiety any. Regarding COVID. So the next set of questions was about making your application list. How many programs did you apply to? How should we pick programs to which, how should we pick programs that are reasonable for us to apply to, especially if we don't have an advisor helping us make these decisions? Should we apply to programs that our stats are higher than average for to compensate? Are there clues or buzzwords we should be looking for on websites that signal that a program is DO friendly?
So what I did is the programs that I was interested in, honestly, I looked at the residents and the attendings, and I saw if they had a DO at the end of their name, to put it simply. I mean, that was the only way that I could really tell, because if you have other DOs in the classes above you, and if they're attending throughout the DO, there's a pretty good chance that this program is going to be DO friendly. I'm trying to think what else. In terms of making what was the question? To make what list?
Your application, like to what programs did you apply to? How did you decide?
Oh, okay. And so, let's think. Okay, well, to make, again, so when you match, which all of you, we hope, will match, you go into a binding agreement. So this binding agreement means that you're stuck with this program and you're going to work there. So honestly, you should really, really, really apply only to places where you can see yourself at and be happy, which you really won't know until interview day. And in terms of scores, if I have received this advice and I follow that advice, and I'm glad that I did, because it worked out in my favor. Even if a program has, I kind of mentioned this earlier, if a program has a specific range of scores, even if your score falls below a little bit, like in reason, I don't know, maybe like within 10 points or something, I would still apply, because oftentimes they might, they do have screens, but oftentimes they'll see something in your application that they might like over another applicant, and they'll pick you out of the bunch. And that's just my advice. I don't know how other people feel about that.
And then how did you pick how many programs to apply to?
So I think for me, because my biggest weakness were my board scores, I honestly tried to apply as many as I could, just because for me, like the more programs that you apply to, if you have lower scores, the more it broadens the places that you could possibly get an interview back. If I had more competitive scores, which I'm sure some of the other panelists can speak to, if you have more competitive scores, I think you have kind of more leniency to apply to less programs because you may be more likely to get an interview. Again, I don't know how the other panelists feel about that, but that's just what I would do. And so I just applied to as many as I could within reason. If my board scores kind of fell, A, like if I would be happy there, and B, if my scores kind of fell within their range.
I'll go. So because my COMLEX level 1 score was lower and I didn't have a step, I feel like I applied to like on the higher side of programs. I applied to 68 programs total. I'm from New York, so I applied to the majority of the New York programs. Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Michigan are all known to be very DO-friendly states because there are DO schools there. So I applied to a lot of programs around there as well. I would say if your board scores are on the lower side, looking at the new programs would be good. Like UPMC Pinnacle just started a program. I interviewed at it and it's incredible. Like it's going to be a great program, but it just might be easier to get in one of the first few years that it started. So I don't know. I mean, I think that you could kind of look at it, but like maybe applying to like 20 programs that would be more of like safeties, or maybe like your board scores are like definitely within, or your it's like associated with your home program, maybe 20 that are kind of target and 20 reach programs. You kind of just never know what's going to happen. So I think that might be a good way. But also I'm curious to see as to what's going to happen in the future, because I don't know if anyone was at ACUG this year, but they talked about this thing where they're going to do like an early acceptance, early decision thing where you're allowed to apply to 5 programs. And then you could, like the residency programs will be able to accept up to half of their class, and then there will be like a regular match. I don't know if that's like actually going to happen or not, but I thought it was a pretty cool idea. It would definitely make couples matching really hard if that's something that you're doing, but I just thought it would be awesome because I probably would have applied to the 5 programs that I really wanted to go to, and they would know that I really wanted to go there because it was like my 5 programs. I also can see something like the SLOs happening, like emergency medicine has this SLO thing, SLOE, standardized letter of evaluation. And I can see OB-GYN going towards doing that because it's standardized. And like they have to evaluate your surgical skills too, which may help in the future. But, I definitely thought it would, like one advisor at my school was like, oh, you should only apply to 30 programs. And that was like terrible advice, so I think you can adjust it based on what your board scores are and what area of the country you're in. Like if you're in the Northeast, there's a lot more programs just around there than if you're looking to apply somewhere in like out West, because there's really only like California.
I kind of took the same approach that I did when I was filtering for sub-Is. I went to states that were DO friendly. I think it's on the NRMP website. They have something where you can like actually type in, I'm forgetting the name of the website if someone knows. But you can type in your scores, what type of student you are, how many research projects you have, how many volunteer things that you have, and then it will actually filter programs and tell you like who has matched there that has like the similar number of like research projects, scores, all that. So I did that to see which programs seemed like they would probably interview me. And then I also did it by location. So I did do a couple interviews on the East Coast just because like Lean was saying, they are more DO friendly in Pennsylvania and even New York, I would say. Yes, it's Residency Explore. It's forgetting that.
When I was making my list, I had kind of a hard time because, as a lot of people have mentioned, like they from California or from New York, where there's all these programs, and I like grew up and went to med school in Colorado, where there's 2 OBGYN program, and then one is the University of Colorado, which is not DO friendly even a little bit. And so I was kind of, I had no really connections to other places. And so I kind of just did like a shotgun approach, and I applied to too many programs, just like I think everyone does, because you're scared that you're not going to match and you apply to too many programs, and you just like keep hitting add on ERAS and you're like, everything's going to be okay. And so I'm not like, I know it's really scary, but I think like obviously everyone applying to too many programs contributes to all the problems. And so I'm not going to tell you to not apply to too many programs, because I know it's scary. But I do think to actually consider like the sub-I, what kind of program you want to be at, how competitive you are, and apply reasonably. I think the 20/20 and 20 suggestion is a really good one. I should have done something like that and I didn't. But yeah, it's hard. It's hard and it's scary, and I really feel for everybody, and I'm glad I don't have to ever do it again, because I know this process really, really sucks. And so we're here for you to support you, because I know it sucks and sometimes you just can't really do anything about it. And you just have to go through it. But yeah, my advice would be to make your list, make your list of what's important to you in a program, where is important to you, and the DO friendliness of programs.
So I go to KCU, which is a DO school that I think we just had our anniversary of like 100 years. So you would think that they would have like solid advice. Turns out my advisor was somebody who completed residency in FM like maybe 20 years ago. And you know, when she looked at my application, which I considered myself to be pretty competitive, she was like, I think you should apply to just 30 programs. And I was like, are you serious? There was like 7 people from our school that went unmatched in OB, and some of them were like, you know, fellows, like OMM fellows, anatomy fellows. And to make matters a little bit more complicated, I actually couples matched. And so even when I told her I was couples matching, she was like, well, actually, I think maybe in that case, you should apply to 60 programs. So people are going to give you advice. Just every situation is different. If you're anxious, apply to however many, you know, whatever. Your situation is different. So I couples matched with a competitive FM applicant, and we applied to 92 programs, which in hindsight maybe was a bit much. But I don't have any regrets, because couples matching is, you know, if anybody's couples matching, feel free to contact me. It throws a whole new, you know, wrench into the ball game, because it's a red flag enough being a DO, and then red flag if you have to talk about couples matching as well. So everybody's situation is going to be different, but I applied to 92. I don't have any regrets. Just be careful about who you get advice from and where you take it. Take every advice with a grain of salt. But I also heavily used the OB-GYN Reddit spreadsheet. I looked at programs that DO applicants had been invited for interviews. Like Hannah said, programs that had DOs there, whether they were fellows or whether they were residents or whether they were attendings. And that's kind of also, and where I wanted to live ultimately was kind of what guided where I applied to.
So just in the interest of time, we've been going for about an hour now, and I know on the East Coast it's almost getting a little later there. So gonna try and condense these questions a little bit. A lot of people asked about who you got to write your letters. How did you ask the people to write those, especially if you don't have a home department or like a chairperson to write those letters? So if you want to really just quickly answer that question for folks.
A letter from someone associated with a residency program means much more than a letter from like a private doctor. So I would just definitely try to have at least one letter with someone who can speak to, I've taught residents for the last 20 years, and this person performs at the level of a resident. And they all know each other too, so they can call them up and be like, oh, hey, John, like whatever, you know. So, I mean, if you have a private doctor who knows you really well, include that letter, but just also make sure you have someone associated with residency.
I agree. And as far as asking them, you just ask them, just like at the end of your rotation, be like, I really enjoyed working with you. Would you mind writing me a letter of recommendation? It doesn't have, like, and most people are expecting it because they have to do it all the time. So it doesn't have, you don't have to overthink it.
Did any of your schools not have home departments for a chairperson to write? I know some programs, some people were saying had requirements that you have a chair letter be submitted.
my school didn't have an OBGYN person, but we have an advisor who writes the chair letter, even though he's not the chair of the OBGYN department. So I don't know if other schools have something like that, because it's very common to have a chair's letter be required. So I think that if you start to ask advisors at your school who writes the chair's letters, I think there's got to be someone, because that's across all specialties that they need those.
Yeah, my school has like just a random lady write them, and she's like really hard to get a hold of and stuff. I actually didn't find as many programs needed the chair letter as I thought. And from one of my rotations, I asked the chair of the department at that hospital to write me the letter, and that counted as the chair letter. So that's also another option.
Cool. So the next, sorry, I don't want to cut people off, but just want to make sure we get to some of these questions. As far as interviews go, did you get significantly fewer interviews than you were expecting? Did you notice regional biases and where you got those invites? And did you feel like you had, when you actually got to the interviews, did you have any barriers as a DO applicant?
I was not disappointed with the number of interviews I got. I was disappointed with the lack of university academic affiliated. I got mostly community. There were not regional biases. I had interviews from West Coast to, I had an interview in New Jersey. I've never been to New Jersey, have no reason to be in New Jersey. Had offers from Florida. I mean, places that I don't have family, have no connection. And maybe that was where scores came into factor. What I was disappointed, and I will say, if you are applying to California, if you have any interest in going back to California, I was pretty disappointed in the amount of interviews I got from there. It's not a DO-friendly state. If you have questions about California, you can, contact me, but that's my answer.
So I had always heard that the key number of interviews you want to get is 13. Apparently, if you get 13 interviews, you have like a 95% chance of matching. I've heard that statistic before. I didn't get 13. And so I was kind of nervous and bummed. And I found that it was really helpful. Like I got waitlisted at a program, and I knew someone who was a resident there because she was in the year ahead of me. So I reached out to her. So she like put in a good word for me. And then I also ended up getting another interview because when I was on, this is kind of weird, came up, but I was on an audition rotation at a program, and one of the doctors there was like, oh, I trained at this program. Like I'm best friends, with the program director there. I'll just text her and she'll give you an interview. And it worked out that way for me. Just because I was saying, I didn't get as many interviews as I had hoped. So if that does happen to you, it doesn't mean it's the end of the world. If you're on a wait list, you can get off. I really think it comes down to connections at that point, but obviously at the first point, it would be scores and all of that.
And you can always go to conferences like ACOOG and stuff to make connections. And the more you put yourself out there, like the more connections you'll make. Like once I did my first rotation, then people were like, oh, like you rotated here with this person. Let me hook you up with this person. And it was like this whole big, like widespread network thing. So you really got to put yourself out there.
Yeah, so I didn't have, definitely did not have 13 interviews for sure. I definitely had like a lower end of interviews, and I wish I could be more helpful because most of the interviews that I did get were from the sub-Is that I did. But just another way to get your foot in the door too that I didn't mention, this goes for sub-Is and for interviews, is if you do rotate at programs where you see that there are fellows, fellows have obviously have done their residencies already. And so if you kind of connect with one of the fellows who might have gone to a residency program that you're interested in, they can be a great connection for you. And that's actually how I got one of my sub-Is, was talking to a fellow who, a gynonc fellow who I bonded with, and she taught me a lot of great techniques and tips for residency as well. And she saw how hardworking I was. And so she actually reached out to her program director who, again, like, when you have fellows, they're at the top of their residency program. They're great they were great residents because they had to be competitive enough to apply for fellowship. And most often program directors will really respect those fellows. So if you do find a fellow, kind of, get to know them, see what residency program they went to. And if you work hard enough, then they may actually reach out to their program director for you. So I think that can go for both sub-Is and interviews.
I only got 8 interviews and I was kind of freaking out about it. And I was on one wait list and I didn't get off of it. And my biggest piece of advice is to not compare yourself to other people. I don't know if the 3rd, soon to be 4th years already have access to that spreadsheet that was going around of like everyone having interviews. And like when I deleted that from my computer, that was like the best day of my life. And they're either gonna come or they're not, and paying attention to if they come for other people is just not going to do you any good for your mental health, or at least it wasn't for me. And I think all the things we've talked about how you put yourself out there and work really hard on your sub-Is and how you make yourself competitive is far more important than the actual number of interviews that you have. If you have 5 interviews and crush all 5 of them, then you'll probably match at one of them. And if you have 20 interviews and you do really bad at all of them, then you might not match. So I think that there's a lot more to it than just the number of interviews. And I was really nervous about the number that I had. And I think in hindsight, it was not the end of the world.
And then, sorry if I missed it, but quite a few people asked if there was any like bias on the interview trail towards DOs that you encountered and how you dealt with that. So I just wanted, for those folks, want to make sure someone spoke to that if they encountered that.
I don't think so. I think once they decide that they're going to interview you, then those biases are gone. So if there's a place that's willing to interview you, then I think it's less likely to encounter that.
Agreed. I feel like the bias was when you weren't offered an interview.
Preach. Yeah, I mean, whatever, I'm awesome. You don't want me, you can't have me.
Preach. I love that. And so the last set of questions are folks that wanted to know what made you stand out. Like basically people wanted to know why you think you matched, and did you have backup plans? Did you dual apply? Did you have something else, at the ready in case you didn't match? And that's kind of like the last bit of questions people had.
I dual applied FM at OB heavy programs. For me personally, I felt that I could find happiness in family medicine if I was doing a little bit of obstetrics. So I would look into programs that are OB heavy if you're going to do that as a backup. But make sure that whatever you do apply as a backup, you're really okay with matching there, because you'll be very sad and disappointed if it doesn't work out. So make sure that you're at peace with that. Because your other options, I think, are to do like a transitional year, which is usually open in the scramble, or to delay your graduation and try to reapply, which for me, I didn't want to do either of those. And I think that's a really personal decision that you have to make for yourself. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I told myself that if I didn't match into OB, then I would scramble. So I chose to just not do apply, although I was thinking family medicine and then later going into women's health. So I decided, so I guess if I didn't match, then I would have SOAPed, which is the scrambling process that you hear about, which is a little stressful. But just so you know that there are women's health fellowships for people in family medicine, and that was something that I was considering doing. I'm sure you can find family medicine programs that have that fellowship, and then maybe try and apply there. I think what made me stand out is, which I know, again, like I feel bad saying this because we don't know what you guys are going to go through in terms of sub-Is, but I think the sub-I for me really made me stand out. For Orlando Health, I showed extreme interest by reaching out to them, months before the audition process. I didn't even get a formal OBGYN rotation there. It was like OB ultrasound. It was an elective, and I still applied, and they saw how interested I was, and they offered me a full 4-week OB-GYN rotation. And then I just worked my ass off. Language, I don't know if that's offensive to anyone. Worked my ass off. I got there early. Residents, typically the interns, get there at like 4 a.m. and I, didn't want to wake up at 4 a.m. But for the week of OB, I went at 4 a.m. to do what the interns did, even though I wasn't required. So doing things that aren't asked of you, going the extra mile, being kind to everyone that you meet, and just really showing like your full spirit. I think what got me was just getting along with the residents and, like I said, working hard. And just be comfortable, I know this is really cliche, but honestly, like, be yourself. Like, you're going to end up where you're meant to be. You're going to end up with the group where you click the most and that you mesh with the most. And I know it's, I don't want to, I'm not trying to minimize anything, because I know the stress you're going through, we all went through it. Like, I remember that anxiety on top of COVID going on. I know how heightened your anxiety must be. And I wish I could offer, more words of relief, but just work your hardest. And if you can do that and then tell yourself you did your best, then you'll end up where you're supposed to be.
Yeah, totally agree. And also, if you have anything that's like a little bit interesting or different about you, I would just take that and like run with it. Like, I'm really into narrative medicine and writing and journaling and like holding narrative medicine support groups. And I talked about that a lot on my interviews, and people were super into it. And then also, like, have interesting hobbies that you write down in your ERAS application. That was the thing that people talked to me about the most, and like make them like kind of funny too. I mean, you have to do it to who your person is, but like for me, I was like trying to keep my houseplants alive, like, just like drinking extreme amounts of coffee, like just little like funny. I mean, I put like real stuff in there too, but those were kind of like conversation starters for the interviews that made it more like a conversation and not so much of like, so why OB, so yeah, like, oh, and the answer to the other question is, if I did not dual apply, but if I did not match, I would have done gen surge and soaked into a prelim year and then tried to go again.
That was also my plan, to soap into a prelim year and go again. I think what Lori said is really true. You have to be okay with whatever you decide and be happy with that, because my 2 things that I considered were family medicine or general surgery, and both of those 2 things I was just kind of like, I really don't want to spend my whole career doing either of those. And so I was like, I'm just going to apply to OB, and if that doesn't work out, then I will find a way to make it work out after that. And I absolutely think the reason that I matched at St. Joe's was my sub-I. And assuming that it works out for you guys, I would you'll make friends with certain residents on your sub-Is, and finding a way to kind of like stay on their radar in not a weird way is something that I would recommend. Like, one of the residents that I got pretty close with, I knew she was taking step 3 in like 4 months after I had left. And so I just like put a reminder in my phone to like text her and be like, hey, good luck on your test. And like, just finding ways to kind of, for them to remember who you were. And my sub-I at Joe's, where I matched, was also in July. So I was their first sub-I. And so there were a lot of sub-Is that came after me. And I was like really scared they were going to forget about me. But yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt just so I don't forget again. So for my program, because I did my rotation in November, my sub-I did something called a second look, which is where you can go back to the program and just kind of, I mean, it is what the name is, a second look. It's just another way for you to show that you're really interested. It's not like a make it or break it. If you don't do it, it's fine, because tons of people have matched without doing it. But for me, because I just wanted to continue my interest, I followed up and did a second look, where it's just like you shadow pretty much for a day, you go back to the program. I did that in like February or so. So that's my little quick tidbit.
One of the programs I interviewed at, Good Samaritan, literally was like, we won't rank you if you don't come here for a second look. And I was like, okay, thanks. You know, like, so I think they just like want people who want them back. But I think you can also kind of tell like the vibes on the sub-I. Like when I did my second look at St. Luke's, like I like walked in and the residents were like, Kathleen, and then one of them was like, oh, I called you as my night float intern next year. So I like had really good vibes like walking out of that second look. But I didn't do a second look anywhere else. I just went because I wanted to hang out with the residents again.
Yeah, I did not dual apply. I did not have a backup. I looked at, the other fields and it was like, what else am I going to do? FM? And I was like, no, definitely not. So my plan was to soap it and try again because that I could only see myself doing OB. Definitely do not dual apply if you just can't bear the thought of soaping and you would rather just match. I mean, this is your career. It's the rest of your life. It should be something that you're passionate about, or something that you can see yourself doing forever. 100% would not have matched unless I did my sub-I. So I really hope that the sub-I stuff gets worked out for you guys, because I loved my sub-I. The residents loved me. I kept in touch with them, kind of like Iris was saying. They were very vocal about, keep in touch. And so I did, and I bonded with them, and you'll find a home no matter what.
Great. So I just wanted to thank all the panelists very much for coming in and sharing their experiences, and I hope that people that logged on found this useful. I know we didn't get to every single question that people had. I'm going to be sending out folks' contact information after this, so if you have follow-up questions, hopefully you can reach out to them. And good luck with this process. I know everything's kind of weird right now, so I hope that it doesn't go too, I hope that they figure it out soon for you guys. I can't imagine having to deal with the stress of applying and figuring out how to do so during a pandemic. So yeah, thanks. Thank you all for joining. And good luck with everything. Stay safe and healthy out there. All right, bye everyone, thanks.